up RSpec and FactoryBot. We are going to create our first test and set up, a factory, and we are gonna pretty much walk through CRUD, which is your CRUD operations, which is create, read, update, and delete or destroy. And so the new things that we're going to talk today, we're going to use today in Rails are we're going to use the get syntax to send a get request to our API. We're going to capture the response to a given request, and then we're going to parse the JSON using the built-in JSON library. In the controller, we're going to use render, and we are going to use a hash argument for render that converts all of our stuff into valid JSON. So the first thing we got to do is that we have to create a new Rails project. And so what we're doing here, something that's relatively new to Rails, is that if you're creating an API-only Rails project, you can append --API to our Rails new line in the command line. And so what that does is it kind of strips out some of the unnecessary stuff that we're not going to need in our Rails, such as like things like views and whatnot. So let's start. So we're going to do Rails, if I can type today, new building internal APIs -t, because we're not doing the thing, -d, Postgres, and --API. And it's going to do the thing. Cool. We're going to go into building internal APIs. I'm going to bundle, make sure everything's good, and then we're going to create the database. Exec rake db create. Cool. It exists from the last time I was running through this, so let's go and do drop, and we're going to create it again. Cool. And so now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my text editor. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to open up my gem file. Personally, I like to take out the comments, especially when I add more gems later, because it'll just make things easier for me to read a little later on. And what I'm going to do is that add it to the development test. I'm going to do gem RSpec -Rails. I'm going to bundle. So it grabs all I need. And I'm going to do Rails G RSpec install, so that we go ahead and install all the files that we need for a thing. So the next things that we need to get our factory set up, and what factories are, is a way for us to kind of generate these fake items so we can run our tests and we don't have to define everything over and over again. And we're going to use it in a limited way here, but it doesn't have the flexibility for us to add kind of complex relationships in the future. But to get things started, we are going to add gem factory bot Rails to our gem file. We are going to save it, and we're going to bundle and make sure that everything in my gem file installed. So now we're going to set up our tests. What we need to do is that we need to add the Rails help to get to the Rails helper file. And we have to set up our configuration here. So in this, I'm going to add a line config.include factory bot syntax methods. So this is where our RSpec configure stuff is set up, and right here we're just saying, hey, RSpec, I want you to use FactoryBot, which I have here. Excellent. So now the idea here, taking a step back and talking from a bigger picture, in software, the thing about software and in real life is that you're never going to know less about a problem than you do right now. That's kind of heavy, and that'll probably hit you 2 a.m. tomorrow morning as you're lying in bed. But the thing is that procrastination and being resolved to solve only the immediate problems can be an effective strategy while running software. I often call this idea of not borrowing trouble, right? Like, you need to fix the problem that's in front of you. You don't need to think about how to solve a problem in the future, because that might not ever happen. For example, like I joke a lot and I say, like, people that are prepping for a zombie apocalypse, it's kind of ridiculous because what are the odds that that's going to happen? Like, I'm not going to put my effort into doing that, but I might, if I live in California, I might have like an emergency pack just in case of earthquake. That's something that has a high likelihood of happening. And so the thing is that our assumptions are often wrong. We need to change what we build, and it's challenging. Let's say we're serving up an API that other companies, other developers are using. So let us say that we are a company that sells things, and we have an API that gives information about what items we have. And if we have an API endpoint of API/item/1, so when they get API/item/1, it returns a JSON response that gives us an item, and this item has an ID, a title, description, number sold. So here's the thing. In the future, what if we say, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be sharing out to the public how many numbers of things get sold? Like that, that might be a good thing to have. But instead, like, we might want to, instead of that, have this attribute called popularity. So that's cool. Let's say we make that change in our API. We replace numbers sold with popularity. What happens to all of our customers and consumers that were dependent on there being a number sold attribute? That theoretically can break all their apps. So what we do is that we provide a better experience by versioning our API. Instead of our endpoint being API/item/1, we can add an extra segment with a version number, something like API/v1/item/1. If we ever want to change our API in the future, we can just, have a new API called API/v2/item/1. And so we can be forward-looking and make changes and have new APIs, like new features even, while still maintaining the old one for people that are still dependent on, for in this example, items still having that number sold. And maybe over time, that's something like you create that V2 and then you send a message out to all your V1 consumers saying, like, hey, we've got this V2, we want you to use it. We're going to shut off V1 on date 6 months future, however long. So let's start by creating our first test. So I'm going to make a directory, spec requests API v1, and then we're going to do touch spec requests API v1 items request spec.rb. So what we're doing, I guess, to kind of talk about the big picture, is that we want to create an API that will deliver up items. And so we are namespacing under API v1. This is how we're going to namespace our controller, so we want to do the same in our tests. So let us open up the spec. Oops, not the spec helper. Items request spec. Cool. And so let's start running our test. The first thing I want to do is we're going to require Rails helper. Describe. Bear with my terrible typing. It sends a list of items. Cool. And we're going to create list item 3. And we're going to go back and talk about what this does. It's going to do in a little bit. Get API v1 items. expect response to be successful. All right. So what this test is doing is that it does this method called create list, and this is something that's provided to us from FactoryBot, where we have it takes these two arguments, the symbol item and the number 3, saying like, hey, FactoryBot, I want you to create for me 3 items. We have get means it's going to send a get request to the API v1 items endpoint and expect response to be successful. The response is going to be what our API sends us back. And we're going to look at that in a little bit in a little more detail. So I have this test. I'm going to save it. And we are going to run our test. Cool. So it says that I don't have a schema yet. I need to run a migration. Cool. Let's do that. And then run RSpec again. Cool. It says items, API sends list of items, failure error, factory not registered item. This is because we've not created a factory yet. The easiest way to create a factory is to generate the model. So we're going to generate the model. Rails G model, item name, description, text. Did I spell that right? Description. Cool. So we're just generating a model that has the attributes name and description, which is text. And we see here that we've created this FactoryBot items.rb. We created the model. A factory was created for the item. So let's run the migration. Oop. Cool. It did that. And so before we run the test again, let's take a look at our factory. We can see that the attributes here are created with auto-populated data using my and the attribute data type, right? So name is going to be my string, description is going to be my text. This is not fun, so we are going to change our kind of factory item. We're going to have a banana stand, and our description is going to be, there's always money in the banana stand. Cool. So now we're going to run the test again. And we see here that our failures that we have no route that matches /API/v1/items. So let's make a route. I'm just going to TDD this. Right. And we're going to namespace it. I apologize if you can hear the background noise. It is currently lightninging and thundering and raining like crazy outside. And you can hear it pretty well. And we need resources, items, only, index. Throw some ends on there, we save it, and we're going to run it again. So we have uninitialized constant API. So our routes file is telling our application to look for a directory API in our controls directory, but it doesn't exist yet. So we're going to need a controller, right? So we are going to go ahead and create that controller. So make directory -p app controllers API v1, and we're going to make the controller file app controllers API v1 items controller.rb, and let's open it up. And here we're going to set up class API v1 items controller inherit from application controller. End. Cool. And then we're going to go ahead and add the action while we're here. I'm just going to leave it blank for now. Or empty, as it were. And we're going to run the test again. And I noticed that I've spelled application controller incorrectly. So we see here that pending failures here, and it passes. So let me do this. In my spec, where are you? My items here. Nope, that's my factories. Items, models. On the item spec, I have this auto-generated thing. I'm just going to comment that out for now, so this is a little cleaner. And I'll run the spec again. And we see here that we have one passing test. Right? So we're getting a response successfully. But here's the thing. Are we getting any items? Well, the answer to that is no. Our index action here is empty, so we're returning nothing. And so, without any data or templates being returned out, the Rails API will respond with status 204 no content. Because it's a 200 status code, it's interpreted by success. So what we're going to do now is that we are going to try to get some data. So let's go back to our item request spec. And we're going to do this. Items equals json.parse response.body. We save it, we run the test, and now we get this JSON parser error unexpected token at something. What's happening is that our body, we're not returning anything back, so we can't parse nothing. And it kind of freaks out. So we're going to go back to our controller, and we're going to actually have it return data. We're going to do this. Render JSON item.all. So what we're doing is that we're using the render method, and what we're doing is this, essentially. We're saying, hey, render in this hash JSON item all. So we're taking all items, converting it to JSON, and then rendering it. And so, let's run the test. And it's passing. Cool, right? So, what we're going to do is that in my gem file, we're going to add, I'm going to take a closer look at what's happening. Gem. We're going to pry. We're going to run bundle. It's going to pry in our items controller. Items request spec. What we're going to do is that right after this, we're going to put it into binding up prime. I want to see what's happening. Right? So let's run the test. Oops. And we've kind of put this breakpoint here. And what we want to do is that we're going to type in response. We're going to see what's in response. We're going to type, we see what's in response and not response. And we see this. Oh, we got an object that's an action dispatch test response. We've got some header stuff. We've got some rack stuff. We got more stuff. We've got a lot. Crazy. Oh, look at all that. You can hear me hitting my space bar. And we're like, that is a lot of information that is coming back to me. Look at that. I'm just going to hit Q to quit. Oops. Sorry. So the response is pretty big, isn't it? And so this is the entire response object. We only care about what's in the body. So if we type in response.body, oh, look at that. This is something a lot smaller and a little something that we can kind of understand better. Like, this is a string because it's enclosed within double quotes, and there's some escape characters here. But we can see that we've got a banana stand here, don't we? And so this is JSON. We need to parse it to get a Ruby object. So what do? we do json.parse response.body. And look at that. That is a lot easier to read. Look at this. What object do we think this is? Class is an array. Count. There's 3 of them. What if we do this? Hash. So when we use JSON to parse the response, it gives us back an array of hash objects. Cool. So here, let's take out our body and our pry. And we have items equals JSON to parse response.body. What we can do is that we can now make assertions on this because we know that items is going to be an array of hashes. We can assert that we expect there to be 3 items. So we save that. We run the test again. Oops, I gotta quit first. And we should have a passing test still, and we do. So cool, we are able to get all the items back. And so the next part is that we are going to test drive how we get the ID endpoint, which is essentially the show action. From the show action, we want to return a single item. So let us test, add the test for this. It can get one item by its ID. Forgot to do. Cool. So we're going to do ID equals create item, some ID. So what's happening here is that FactoryBot's going to create an item, and then it's going to grab its ID and set equal to ID. We're going to hit our API endpoint, get /API /v1/items /interpolated ID. Right? Item equals json.parse response.body. Expect the response to be successful. We expect the item ID to equal the ID that we have above. Right? We've created an item. We expect its ID to match whatever we call it by. All right, so what error do we think we're going to get, if any, if we run RSpec now? Oops, need to save. Oh, no route matches the API v1 items 37. Cool. So let's go to our routes. We have index. We want to grab the show. We save it, run it again, and it says no show action, literally. So we go back to the controller, show, cool, run the test again. Unexpected token of thing at empty string. Well, that's because it's not returning anything. We saw this error previously. And so what we're going to do is here in the show action, we're going to do the same thing very closely to what above. Render JSON. And instead of item at all, we want to grab the single item. Item.find, params ID. The file saved. We run our test, and look, got 2 passing tests. Excellent. So our next step, we got to create. Let's start with a test. Nope, not def. It can create a new item. So item params equals saw. Oops. Forgot the key. Name saw, description. I want to play a game. I'm not a fan of horror movies. I understand this is a horror movie and this is probably terrifying, but I'm not going to watch it. You guys don't understand horror movies. Why would you want to scare yourself? That sounds terrible. So, this is where we're going to be a little different from before. Previously, we've just been getting things. Now we're sending information. So we're going to use the post method here. API /v1 /items params item params, right? We want to send a post request to API v1 items, and the params we're going to send it are this item with the item params that we've created above. We're going to set item equal to item.last, because when we're creating a new item, it's going to be the last one that we have redone. We can do expect expect response to be successful. Expect item dot name to equal item params. Item params name. Cool. And we're going to get this error message that we have no route that matches, so that's cool. Make a route. Create. Run the test. It's going to complain that there's no action. No action. Cool. And now we run it again. It says undefined method name for no class. Well, that's because we haven't created anything, can we? So we're going to create an item with incoming parameters. So what we're going to do is that we're going to take advantage of all the niceties that Rails gives us, and we're going to use strong params. So let's do that first. Private def item params dot require item dot permit name description. And over here, what I'm going to do is render JSON item.create item params. Cool story. And now we've got 3 passing tests. Fantastic. So we've got the create, we've got the read, we've got the create and the read. 2 kinds of reads. Now for the U part, which is update, we start as always with the test. It can update an existing item, do, and ID equals create item.id. Previous name equals item.last.name. Item params equals name sledge. Put, not puts. API v1 items, not v2, v1 items ID params item params. So we're making a put request to this endpoint with the params as being this hash of the item params. Item equals item dot find by ID. We're going to expect the response to be successful. We're going to expect that the item dot name to not equals previous name. We expect that the item name to equal sledge, right? So we're testing that our response to this call is going to be successful. We are expecting that the name is not the same as it used to be. And we expect that the item name is going to be sledge, because that's what we updated it to here. Excellent. We run our tests. Surprise, surprise, no route matches. We go back to our routes folder. We add update. Run the test again. Action, no action update. Man. Def update. Cool. Run it again. We expected the value not to be banana stand, but we got banana stand. We're not actually updating. So here in our update, we can leverage all the things we have. Render JSON. Item.update. Params ID. Item params. We run the test again. 4 passing tests. So now, one last endpoint to test and implement, that is destroy. That feels good to say. So, it can destroy an item. So, to first destroy an item, we have to create it. Whoops. So we've created an item. Expect count. I'm going to expect that we have one item because we've created the one item. Delete API v1 items item ID expect dot we expect the response to be successful. We expect the item dot count to equals 0, right? Because we had one item, we deleted one, expect there's 0 items. And we expect that item dot find item dot ID. We're gonna look for the item. Oops. Need braces here. Trace error. Cool. So we expect the response to be successful, we expect there to be 0 items, and we expect that when we try to look at that error, look for that item, it's going to raise us an error. So, no route matches delete. We have been here before. What we can do is that we can start doing this, but like, no, let's not. We got a lot of stuff here, just making it wider and wider. So let us kind of reverse this. We'll flip it and reverse it. And we will do accept. Accept is one of those words I'm always afraid I'm going to spell wrong. New and edit. Cool. Run the test. No destroy action. Oh, wrong file. And we run the test. And we've got all passing things. And we just made an API that will return us all the items, show, create, update, destroy.